Hey, this is Wes, the Explosion, and I might have done what I said I was considering doing last week, against my better judgment. Buying a bunch of stuff off the eShop and making the number of games on the backlog go up instead of down. So sue me. There was a good percentage taken off the prices though, so it was hard to resist, and I already cleared 2 of the things that I picked up, so hey, at least I can put in a good showing this week. The first thing was Cuphead, specifically the DLC expansion, The Delicious Last Course. In this, Cuphead and Mugman head off to another island to help Miss Chalice. By defeating a new set of bosses, you can get the ingredients needed to make a set of tarts that can permanently change her from ghost to corporeal. For the time being though, by snacking on a magical cookie, she can swap places with one of the brothers temporarily to become playable. Doing so takes up your charm slot, but instead of that, Miss Chalice can double jump, dodge roll, and parry dash, changing up the gameplay quite a bit. Of course, I only tried these out in the tutorial and stuck with Cuphead for the new campaign, partly because I knew how he worked, partly so that I could save Miss Chalice to do a full playthrough specifically with her. Looking forward to that. Anyway, there are 12 new boss battles, 5 in the main story, 2 are secrets that I won't spoil, though they were in my clip show if you're super interested, and 5 are special challenge battles. You get one of these to start, and the next gets unlocked each time after you beat one of the main battles. For these special fights, each of which are modeled after a chess piece, you have no weapons or charms, and can only use parries to do damage. While all of them allow you only that one method of attack, each challenges you in a different way, and these were my favorites in the DLC. They were all just so creative and well thought out. I had to really focus and couldn't just rely on the old spray and pray, and at times I pulled off things that I would have previously thought myself incapable of. My favorite part of the DLC was the fight against the Rook. I mean, just look at this. I'm fighting an executioner, grinding his axe as he sends severed heads my way, which I have to hit back, them getting wicked looks on their faces as I give them a chance at revenge. It's cool, it's creepy, it's whimsical, I love it. In addition to the new bosses, there's some new stuff to buy at the shop as well. There's a few new weapons, 2 of which I tried but got no use out of, though the third, which I called the air shooter because it reminds me of the Mega Man 2 weapon, shoots mini whirlwinds that travel forward and up at a sharp angle, which was really helpful since some of the bosses loom over you. There's also a few charms. One, you get dirt cheap and need to unlock its true function, which makes the game a lot harder. If you beat all the bosses with it, you get an achievement, but I'm not that good, so I went no further than powering it up, if that's what we can call that. The other can give you extra HP, up to 3 points if you parry enough during a battle. This felt almost like cheating, granting a lot of extra wiggle room in fights, but hey, it's not too different from how much better the smoke bomb was in the base game, so I let myself get away with using it in some matches. Then there is one actual cheat. While I was streaming the game, someone entered my chat and told me to spin around 5 times on the overworld, which I did to see if they were screwing with me. Doing so, and then hitting the confirm button when prompted, brought up Jimmy, who granted me a wish, doubling my life until my next win, which he said he would do up to 3 times. It was a neat inclusion, a good way to make some of the harder fights more doable, and I appreciated the tip. It just seemed like the sort of thing that would delegitimize my victory, so whenever I would get down to 3 HP while it was activated, I would count it as a loss and restart the fight. That's the gist of the extra content on offer here, so now's the point where I have to admit that I didn't like this nearly as much as the base game. As usual, I have a few theories for this. Part of it could be that I stream my playthrough of it, and doing so has been known to cut down on my enjoyment of some games. Another possibility is that I played the original content several times and as such am much better at it, so I could be taking the very immature stance of liking a game much less because I'm not as good at it. Such a proclivity runs in my family. Then there's the element that felt a bit off from what I was used to with Cuphead proper, and that was all the disconnected parts of the boss fights. While this wasn't so much the case with the chess-themed foes, multiples of the main bosses had parts that moved independently of each other, and sometimes they could combine to make it seem nigh unavoidable to take damage. In the first phase of Esther Winchester, you have to worry about what the boss herself is doing, as well as a bird that would fly in and drop dynamite, and another enemy that would appear to spit cactus balls at you. Against Glumstone, you had the giant to contend with, as well as rising and falling platforms, gnomes that would pop out of the ground and shoot fireballs, and another gnome that would climb up platforms to try and bop you. And if Mortimer Freeze offers you popsicles, you do not want them. Trust me. Some of these extra elements can be taken out to cut down on the noise, but given that they respawn, it's a temporary solution and can lead to so much being on screen at once that your success can feel more like RNG than skill-based. And yeah, despite what I kind of implied, the original Cuphead bosses would occasionally do the same. Cagney Carnation and Kala Maria come to mind. However, given how many more bosses were in the standard game, they felt more like the exception rather than the rule, which brings up another slight issue. Given that this side island has fewer bosses and none of the running guns that the Inkwell Isles have, you don't have as many options when choosing what to go up against in the DLC. If you get stuck on a boss, you don't have as many alternatives, which isn't necessarily a flaw, it's just something that was nicer in Cuphead Prime. And I think that brings up the biggest and most likely reason for why I didn't enjoy the DLC as much as I did the original. Cuphead was such an excellent game, one of my favorites of all time, I'd say. That topping, or heck, even matching it, was a tall and nigh impossible challenge. Honestly, while I think subsequent runs will cause me to warm up to it as I get more familiar with each fight and each boss gets more chances to endear themselves to me, I don't think it'll ever quite become as beloved as the vanilla game was to me. Overall, I'd say the expansion is worth the price and time. It took about 5 hours for me to beat it, which is about half an hour over the average, and I look forward to playing around with it more in the future. Unfortunately, until I do, I feel like I can only really call what I've said more my first impressions rather than an actual review, and some of my thoughts were likely skewed by my choosing to stream it, but I think I can at least be unbiased enough to recommend it if you like the base game. Might be a little rough if you weren't able to beat it though, since I do think this content was a bit harder. Oh, and hey, I saw they put out a trailer for the next set of episodes for the Cuphead cartoon, and while I like the ones that they already put out and look forward to more, I swear if they do not put Cagney in any of them, I will be extremely cross. He's like the most iconic boss, how can you just skip over him? The other game was an indie called Imp of the Sun, from Sold Out Sales and Marketing Ltd? Is that really the studio's name, or is the software info page screwing with me? Anyway, there's an eclipse, so the sun sends down this little booger to set things right. I believe the game is classed as a Metroidvania, but it's a little more open-ended than that. After you beat the tutorial area, there being 4 areas to beat in whatever order you choose. Each area follows the pattern of exploration, then a fight with a few waves of enemies, which beating will net you a special ability to further explore the area and find 2 objects to unlock a shrine, which will then open up a boss battle that beating not only progresses the game, but also grants you a super to use. Besides the abilities and supers, there are 2 skill trees on top of that. The first will build your air and ground combos. The second expands your HP, attack, and sun meter. The last you use to heal or use some of your special abilities, like becoming translucent to slip through some obstacles and attacks, or igniting to light torches or do extra damage. The meter either fills back up over time in sunlight, or almost instantaneously when within range of a torch. The game is a pain in the butt. It controls mostly fine. You have a lot of momentum, kinda like Mario or Sonic, which can be a little hard to keep a handle on, but hey, it's a choice, and if you get into a groove, flying through some of the spaces can feel pretty exhilarating. You only need each area's skill to complete it, but if you do have the abilities from other levels, you can downright break the puzzles, which is certainly interesting. All that said though, it's easy to slip up and have to do a section over, and if you happen to fall into a hazardous surface, like water or spikes, it doesn't reset your double jump, so you just kinda bounce into it several times, taking damage over and over in between iframes, until you either die or somehow drag yourself back over to a platform, probably near death. Heck, there's some boat sections where you have to swipe at the sail to move it along, and if you fully upgraded your ground combo, if you do it too fast, you'll fly off the back of the boat, making it so that getting stronger actually hurts you. The map is also really unhelpful, just kind of showing the whole area once you've got a map and giving you a vague idea of where you're at in it, with no indication of where you have and have not yet been, other than fast travel spots that you unlock. It can lead to a lot of wandering around, and it's baffling how they managed to lay it out this poorly when Metroid perfected its map system ages ago, with the more successful in the genre just aping that. Combat is also a nightmare, your attacks having a tiny hitbox, a bit smaller than your own, making it so that you have to be pretty much on top of an enemy to strike them. Sometimes opponents will spawn in on top of you, while also attacking. Sometimes obstacles and enemy placement also feels super unfair. Overall, you just feel way too weak and limited. The bosses are especially a sore spot. The first took me so many tries to beat that I couldn't even hazard a guess. Being able to eliminate my platforms, make it rain to get rid of my sun meter, turn invincible, heal, and spam a flurry of projectiles with slight homing capabilities. The second boss I beat in one, but it was super tedious, you having to dodge until he uses a specific attack that lets you counter him to open him up to some real damage. The third took me several tries and was the most straightforward, having telegraphed attacks, but in the second phase, striking so fast that it was hard to get in any hits myself. The fourth took me 2 tries, you having to run around a dark area and light a series of torches as the boss pops in to attack, to open them up to harm. When you do though, they flail around and it's really hard not to get hit as you try to deal damage. The whole affair is very unpleasant, and this gets exacerbated in the second phase as, when they jump in to strike, they also put out a torch if they're close enough to one. Once you take all 4 down, you get a series of challenge areas to test your skills, and these are some of the better executed sections, though they can still be a bit rough. Then you fight the final boss, which took me 2 tries to clear, and is pretty straightforward, like the third boss I mentioned. Maybe tackling some of the areas in a different order would have made things more bearable, as some of them and the bosses would have been much more manageable, though I do contend that the first that I fought would have been the worst even if I had somehow tackled them after the final boss. Overall, the game feels like a group project, where a few people had to pull the weight of the entire team, and unfortunately, the end product doesn't get a passing grade. The art team did an amazing job. The game looks great and stylish. If this were, say, a comic or cartoon, I'd eat it up. A lot of the ideas are also interesting, with the open-ended Metroidvania-esque setup and all the ways you can build your character. While the controls can be a little difficult at times with how slippery you are, as you collect more abilities, it can be downright thrilling to zoom around a map. Like I said though, combat sucks. Some of the maneuvers you're expected to pull off are pretty ridiculous, and navigation feels like something you do more by stumbling about than planning a route. With how unforgiving and unfair the game can seem, I honestly have to question whether or not it was done intentionally to pad out the runtime. An average playthrough takes around 5 hours, and I think it took me about 4, give or take, so I could see them not wanting to have to advertise a much shorter experience if they had made things more reasonable. The trade-off, though, is a game that's really not much fun to play, that I really wouldn't recommend. Oh, and the music is practically non-existent, though I suppose that means I can make it anything I want. Yeah, my choice might be a little inappropriate. If you listen real closely, though, you might hear the game's actual OST in there somewhere. So I bought 8 things and cleared 2 of them, so only 6 games get added to the backlog. What a deal! It honestly would have been a bit more, but I actually looked into a few of the games on the eShop that I was tempted with and was able to eliminate some of them, so it honestly could have been worse. Only 2 of the games are over 20 hours anyway, so I should be able to whittle things down again pretty quickly. For right now though, the backlog is back up to 111. As always, thanks for watching. Maybe subscribe if you're interested in either random, oftentimes untimely reviews, or Mega Man, the other bulk of my content. And perhaps I'll see you in the next episode. Later!